Part 20. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 191. Chapter 191 I am your fiancé. The other side. Jongwon and Luzes who walked together on the playground. From time to time, there would be a gust of wind blowing across her face. Jongwon would wrap up her clothes tightly. She was really afraid of the cold. Xiao's Huzi, why aren't you happy when you return to your alma mater? Jongwon stretched out her hand to poke him. Luzes who grabbed her hand and wrapped it with his own big hand, and then said, why don't you see that I'm unhappy? I'm very happy, but, it's because I saw you. Jongwon felt happy in her heart, but she made a disdainful cut sound on her lips. When I go to junior high school, I can see you every day, Jongwon said. Why? Because I'm going to your junior high school. But when you go, I will go to high school. I know, I've been fine for a long time, but don't forget that the key high school is in the junior high school you are studying in now. It is just a junior high school and a high school. I know you can definitely study in the key high school. Jongwon was full of confidence, as if he was the one who could take the exam. Jinchin's key high school is indeed in the same place as the junior high school that Luzes who is currently studying in. It is indeed as Jongwon said, divided into junior high school and high school. Luzes who thought it was funny. He chuckled and said, I think about it a lot every day, but have you ever thought about whether you can get into the junior high school I'm studying in with your grades? Junior high school is also important, and grades are also required. Yes, I am working hard now and study seriously every day, Jongwon said with firm eyes. Then tell me how hard you work. Luzes who pulled her to the side and sat down on a bench. That's it, listen carefully to what the teacher says, and don't be ashamed to ask questions. If you don't know how, ask Zhang Baihui to help me analyze it. I'm actually not very stupid. I can still understand some difficult questions after being taught a few times, Jongwon said. At the end they all laughed sheepishly. Zhang Baihui will give you a lecture, Luzes who frowned. His impression of Zhang Baihui was getting worse and worse now. How could he feel relieved to put the little girl in his hands? Yes, we are at the same table. Let's talk about a topic. It's nothing, right? Jongwon saw Luzes whose mood and was careful when speaking at the end, for fear of offending him. There is something, there is too much. He doesn't want Zhang Baihui to talk about some topic to the little girl. What should he do if she is abducted while talking? Isn't it worth the loss? Couldn't he see what that kid thought about Jongwon? Jongwon is stupid and blind, but he is not stupid. If you have any questions that you don't know in the future, you'd better call me after school and I'll explain it to you. I'm afraid you'll make others angry because you're too stupid. Are you that stupid? He shouldn't be angry. He's very patient. The key is that he won't laugh at me for being stupid. Jongwon pouted at the end, as if she was dissatisfied with Luzes who calling herself stupid. Luzes who smiled and touched her head, then took her other hand and wrapped it up, blinked, and then said, I am your fiancé, I am more trustworthy. Jongwon's face turned red, and she couldn't help but bury her head in Luzes whose arms and muttered, I hate it. The two sat on the bench for a while longer before Luzes whose phone and watch rang. He looked at it and answered, what's wrong? Do you want beauty rather than power? We're almost there. Where are you? I'll find you. Avril's voice came from the other end. In the playground. After finishing speaking, he didn't know what was said over there. Jongwon raised her head and asked, is Sister Avril coming over? Well, it's about to start, how about you come with me later? Okay, I will applaud you hard from the front row, and I'll grab Xiao, He Chiu and Zhang Baihui by the way. The two people in front are fine, but forget about the one in the back. As long as you don't applaud him when he comes on stage, I'll be satisfied. End of this chapter. The Liu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 192. Chapter 192 Victory Without a Fight. How can that be? Okay, that's my desk mate and we're in the same class. Zhang Wanan looked at Lu Zizhu seriously and said. Okay, we're in the same class, applause Lu Zizhu said helplessly in the face of her serious look. The two talked for a while and Avril came over. She was a little surprised when she saw Zhang Wanan still here. Anan, aren't you going back? Your class is going to line up to listen to the speech. I'll go with Xiao Jojo. Zhang Wanan looked at Lu Zizhu with a silly smile on his face. Okay, Avril shrugged helplessly, thinking that she was going to be abused again. The three of them arrived at the auditorium where they were going to give a speech. Zhang Wanan and Lu Zizhu were walking in the front and laughing, but Avril was the only one who walked behind and watched their backs being tortured. After arriving, Lu Zizhu watched Zhang Wanan find his class and then gave a few instructions before walking backstage. I can't tell, it's quite affectionate. Avril couldn't help teasing her on the way to the backstage. Lu Zizhu only smiled softly when he heard what she said. When the two arrived backstage, Lu Zizhu never expected that the first person he saw when he opened the door was Zhang Baihui, who was standing alone. He was reading the speech very seriously, but when he heard the sound of the door opening, he unexpectedly raised his head. Their eyes met for a moment. Lu Zizhu just glanced at him and then looked away and walked forward without speaking to him. Zhang Baihui was also stunned for a moment, then lowered his head and read the manuscript carefully. Lu Zizhu has rehearsed and delivered speeches based on the script several times, and he has already memorized it in his mind. However, he does not dare to be careless, especially since this is the first time he is giving a speech under Zhang Wanan's nose, so he cannot make any mistakes. He looked around and finally found a quiet spot in the corner, sat down, took out the delicate manuscript folded in his pocket, spread it out and read it carefully. Although he would feel bored after reading this manuscript too many times, he didn't feel that way every time he thought of Zhang Wanan, because thinking of Zhang Wanan gave him motivation. The order of entry was all taken. This time, Lu Zizhu's entry number was magically the same as during the selection, which was number 9. When he got the number plate, he was surprised. It always felt like it was an arrangement of fate. He went to participate in the selection in order to meet her, and the selection number was number 9, but he ended up here as number 9. What else is it but fate? Is it a coincidence? But even if it was a coincidence, he was satisfied. Anyway, he had already met the person he wanted to see. Everyone on or off stage was busy that day. No matter how loud or noisy the sound was, Lu Zizhu was not disturbed. Even Avril, whose number plate was number 3, came to him for comfort. He just smiled and said nothing. Avril was looking for boredom, so she simply stayed away from him and waited to go on stage. When Lu Zizhu came on stage, his tall posture and good-looking face still caused a commotion below, but he didn't care about it at all. The first thing he did when he came on stage was to look for the person in the audience. Maybe he really has telepathy. He actually saw her in the vast sea of people at a glance. At this moment, she was refilling his pen. Lu Zizhu lowered his head and smiled and slowly walked towards the microphone to start the speech he had been preparing for a long time. Not only does he have a tall figure and good-looking face that make people admire him, but he also has a beautiful and moving voice. When he opens his mouth on the stage, he is already applauded like thunder. Just looking at this posture can make him win without fighting. This made many of the competitors backstage envious and jealous, but they couldn't hate him. The only fault was that the men on stage were so good that they could only make him look good. Lu Zizhu finished his speech amidst a round of applause and then bowed politely and left the stage. But before leaving, he took a sneak peek at the little girl, and he clearly saw the reluctance in the little girl's eyes. Lu Zizhu shook his head helplessly. The next time they meet may be on Saturday or weekend, because he will have to go back to school after he leaves the show. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 193. Chapter 193 High School Entrance Examination. His purpose was not to give a speech to gain the limelight. His purpose was to meet Jongwon-in. He thought he might be really selfish. Let's go, the school's car is already outside, but there are still a few people who haven't played yet. Let's go to the car and wait, Avril said when Luzes who returned to the backstage. Luzes who nodded and walked out. Luzes who lowered his head and walked out. Avril followed him and peeked at him from time to time. After a while, Avril hesitated and said, "You're not crying, are you?" Luzes who raised his head with a confused look on his face. "Why are you crying?" "I thought you were crying secretly with your head down," Avril said, a little embarrassed, but thinking about it, how could someone as proud as Luzes who cry? The two people got into the car. Now there were only 4 people in the car including the driver. The other person who came to give a speech was a girl who finished her speech early. When she saw Avril coming up, she pulled Avril over to talk to her very familiarly. Luzes who himself sat in the back row and looked out the window quietly. He didn't expect that he hadn't adapted yet. People who used to be able to see him when he opened his eyes could now only take a look through a video call. If he wanted to have a real touch, he would have to wait a week. For him, a week is really long. People from the school got on the car one after another. When there were enough people, the driver started the car, and Luzes who also turned his head to look forward. Just because he didn't take a second look outside the bed, the moment he turned his head, a small figure ran over from there. When Jongwon-in ran out, she looked desperately at the car that had driven away and was unhappy. She kicked the pebbles under her feet and headed back to the way she came. She had a hard time asking for leave from the teacher and said she needed to go to the toilet, so she sneaked out. But she didn't expect that he left just after she came out. "How was it? Did you catch up with Xiao's Huzi?" Su Jiao asked as soon as he returned, looking more excited than she was. "No, he's gone." Jongwon-in was like a deflated balloon. "Then see you next time. We will arrive at Jiangbai in a while." "We applaud him as hard as we just applauded your little's Huzi," Su Jiao comforted her and said. Jongwon-in managed to gather some energy, but when she sat up straight she said, "I have no strength left." "Then, just applaud if you can, don't try too hard." Jongwon-in nodded and looked towards the stage. Asterisk. The two people who met less often after Luzes who was promoted to the 3rd grade of junior high school and was busy studying. When Luzes who finished his senior high school entrance examination in his 4th year of junior high school, Jongwon-in desperately wanted to follow him to cheer him up. She didn't even go to class in order to cheer him up. She didn't know where to find a place to sit and cool down on a hot day. Luzes who took the exam for 2 days, she waited outside for 2 days, and fell ill. On the day of the crowd, the water blocked at the door could not be leaked. Jongwon-in followed the two behind Luzes who and held his hands tightly. "Xiao Jojo, take the exam well, I'll wait for you outside," Jongwon-in said when they arrived at the door. "Don't worry, go find a place to stay. Don't stay outside on such a hot day. There are many people today. Don't run around. Just follow Dad," Luzes who said and looked at Lulin. "I just thought of your dad at this time. I thought it was an accident that you two came here." Lulin rolled his eyes and said helplessly. He left his job in the company and came here to accompany him to take the high school entrance examination, but he didn't expect that this boy would treat him like a transparent person. Finally, he thought about finding someone to take care of his wife before he thought of him. Is it easy for him to be a father? He bought. "Anan, come with Dad." Lulin waved to Jongwon-in and said. Jongwon-in nodded and waved to Luzes who, "Come on." Luzes who nodded solemnly and disappeared from the sight of Jongwon-in and Lulin with the flow of people. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 194. Chapter 194. Yeah. Luzes, who was writing furiously in the examination room, while Jongwon was sweating in the heat outside. Her posture looked like she was sticking out her tongue like a puppy. Daughter, Daddy, will you take you over there to have a cup of milk tea and enjoy the air conditioner? Lulin was also sweating profusely from the heat at this moment, and kept fanning himself with a small fan given by the roadside. Who would have thought that the dignified CEO of the Lu family would be reduced to sweating and fanning on the roadside at this moment? Just fan him, but before he looked at him in the company, the employees would be scared, but now who would have thought that his daughter wouldn't listen to his words? Dad, sit down for a while. Jongwon patted the stone slab that was burned by the sun and said. Why sit here if you don't have a cool drink in an air-conditioned room? There are plenty of mosquitoes, so why bother? Lulin couldn't figure out why Jongwon was like this. Anan, listen to Dad and go sit over there. That brat won't be out for more than an hour, Lulin continued to persuade. Soon Jongwon said with a smile, her hair was wet with sweat. It was really hot that day. Jongwon thought, what's more than an hour? It used to take a week for them to meet each other. If she couldn't wait for more than an hour, what else could she say? Lulin shook his head helplessly at her stubbornness. This was just a high school entrance examination. What will happen in the future college entrance examination? Jongwon was so stubborn that Lulin couldn't persuade her, so he had no choice but to sit there with her and fan her against the mosquitoes. After finishing the morning exam, Luzes who followed the crowd and walked out again. After he came out, he walked straight towards the willow tree. As expected, Jongwon and Lulin were standing there waiting for him with smiling faces. So you two have agreed on a place a long time ago, no wonder I had to wait at the door if you didn't want to. Lulin pinched Jongwon's cheek helplessly. What if Xiao Jojo can't find us? Jongwon said, already scrambling away from Lulin's hand and running to hold Luzes hand. Lulin. He felt more and more that he was redundant today. Maybe he shouldn't have come, and should just stay in the company and blow the air conditioning ducts while approving documents for his subordinates. How is it difficult? Jongwon asked. For me, it's a trivial matter, I can solve it all, Luzes said with some pride. Well, Xiao's Huzi is great, he will definitely do well in the exam, Jongwon said, already giving a thumbs up. What did you do? Your hair looks like it has been washed. Did you disobey and wait here all day? Aren't you hot under such a strong sun? Luzes helplessly touched her wet hair. Jongwon was afraid that Luzes would be angry, so he followed the example of the internet and replied excitedly, yeah. Dad, why don't you take her to have a cup of milk tea and wait? Luzes suddenly asked the autistic Lulin who was walking in front. Lulin turned around and looked at him confused when he heard this question. She, Anan insists on waiting for you outside, and I can't persuade her. Lulin stammered for a long time to organize his words. He is so innocent. Really? Luzes looked at Jongwon with ferocious eyes. Yes, Jongwon knew that she couldn't let her father take the blame for her. Don't be so stupid. Next time if you faint from heat stroke, I'll still have to worry about you. You won't be able to pass the test by then. Find a store in the afternoon and sit and wait, Luzes said to her seriously. Jongwon was about to say no, but when she looked up, she saw Luzes eyes instantly frightened, and he pursed his lips and nodded obediently without saying anything else. Lulin. Why didn't he think of saying that at the time? If he had thought of it at that time, would he not have to suffer the consequences outside? Really are. Let's go eat. Lulin's voice was full of helplessness. Seeing that Luzes was taking exams today and Jongwon was out in the sun all day long, Lulin decided to use his long-hidden private money to take the two of them to eat delicious food. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 195. Chapter 195 The Best in the Universe. Think about how selfless he is. He had been timidly saving that money for a long time, and he might spend it all in one meal today. Looks like I have to go to my wife to get my pocket money again when I get home. Let's go have dinner first, and then go back to the hotel and take a nap to avoid feeling sluggish in the afternoon, Lulin said. The school where Who took the exam was far away from home, much further than going to a junior high school, so Lulin took his two children to stay in a hotel near the school, and he had to stay with him during the 2 days of the exam. Jongwanan and Who nodded and followed his pace. Lulin led the two children into a beautifully decorated restaurant. Lulin introduced that it was a time-honored restaurant and the food there was delicious. He sometimes brought customers to eat here and was a regular customer. "Dad, is your private money enough for us to have a meal?" Who couldn't help but ask. The waiter who took the order almost couldn't help but laugh when Who said this, but her good professionalism made her hold it back. Lulin instantly felt very shameless. He really wanted to beat Who, but because today seemed like a beating was not enough, he held back. He glanced at the snickering waiter and said angrily to Who, "If I don't have enough money, I'll use your pocket money to make up for it." Who and Jongwanan: "Is this really good?" "No, Dad, I have to save my pocket money to buy delicious food." "If you use it, I won't have anything to eat," Jongwanan said aggrievedly. She still loves to eat after so many years, and snacks are her life. "Me too, I want to buy it for her." "Her money is not enough for her to eat," Who pointed at Jongwanan and said. Jongwanan looked at Lulin and nodded seriously in agreement. Lulin: "Mr. Lu, do you want more?" the waiter couldn't help but ask. "How many dishes are there?" Lulin asked helplessly with a long sigh. "3 dishes and 1 soup." "Okay, that's it." Lulin waved his hand and said. The waiter nodded and picked up the menu before saying, "Mr. Lu, you are such a nice couple." Lulin instantly became happy when he heard others praising his child. "Really? I think it's just a bit of a trick, too." After that, Lulin felt helpless. The waiter couldn't help covering his mouth and smiled. "Mr. Lu, I'm going down first. The food will be ready in a moment." Lulin nodded and said no more. "Dad, the waitress praised us," Jongwanan said with a smile. "Yes, yes, yes, you two are good, the best in the world. As long as you don't cheat your father, you will be the best in the universe." 3 dishes and 1 soup were served one after another. Jongwanan may have been really hungry, as he devoured the food as soon as it was served. Lulin saw that Jongwanan was so good at eating and called the waiter over. "A few more dishes," he said helplessly. "No need to add more," Jongwanan said inarticulately with his eyes wide open. Who hurriedly handed over a glass of water and said, "Tien. There aren't many vegetables left. If we don't add more vegetables, do we want them to have vegetable soup?" "A few more. If the money is not enough, Dad will work here washing dishes. It'll be fine. You can eat as much as you want. Don't feel bad for Dad," Lulin said as if he was going to war. "Okay, let's add a few more." Jongwanan nodded and said, "I don't have enough yet." "I'm not enough either," Who said. "I don't feel sorry for his father at all." "Believe whatever you say." "Then, how many more will Mr. Lu have?" the waiter asked uncertainly. "Come," Lulin said excitedly, slapping the table. Just like that, there were 2 more dishes on the table. Lulin felt his heart bleed as he looked at these dishes. "It's all done." The 2 of them ignored him and just kept their heads down eating. Lulin went out for a while. "Honey, please send me some money. It may not be enough to take the 2 children out for dinner," he called Lin 11 and said. "Don't you have enough private money?" Lin 11 asked directly without beating around the bush. "How did you know?" End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 196. Chapter 196. Nothing. Heh, you took the money secretly this morning. You thought I didn't see it, Lin 11 said with a cold snort. I shouldn't hide money secretly, but believe me, I've been saving for so long to take care of my 2 children, and I've done nothing. I'm very busy right now, so I won't pursue it for now. I'll send you the money later. Okay. Thank you for your hard work, wife. I'll come see you this afternoon, Lu Lin said flatteringly. The reason why Lin 11 is busy is that she is no longer doing nothing as before. In the past few years, she and Tang Yu have opened 2 shops in partnership, a flower shop and a dessert shop. The 2 of them are running well and have a steady stream of customers. It's just that I have less time to spend with my family. No need, take care of the 2 children. Don't let anything happen at this critical moment, Lin 11 instructed. That's not possible, don't worry, Lu Lin assured him. The 2 said a few more words and then hung up the phone. Lu Lin returned to the private room, threw his cell phone on the table, and said with a bad expression, "It's all because of you 2 brats. Your mother knows about the money I hid." "Oh, that's good," Lu Zizhu said calmly, but Zhang Wanan only focused on eating and didn't speak at all. Lu Lin shook his head helplessly, thinking, what are these 2 things? Forget it. Nothing. After lunch, the 3 of them returned to the hotel. As soon as they arrived at the hotel, Zhang Wanan lay down on the bed sleepily and fell asleep. She's really like a pig. She sleeps when she's full and eats when she wakes up, Lu Zizhu said helplessly, shaking his head, and then thoughtfully adjusted the air conditioner temperature for her and covered her with a thin quilt. You should also take a nap, don't feel sluggish in the afternoon, Lu Lin said. I'm full of energy, Lu Zizhu said nonchalantly. Anyway, the question was simple, and he could just lay down and sleep after finishing the examination. Anyway, it was nothing. Oh, then you are really a spirited young man, Lu Linbei glanced at him and returned to his room. Lu Zizhu glanced at Zhang Wanan, who was sleeping soundly, and lay down on the other side gently, pulling on some quilt and closing his eyes. Asterisk. Lu Lin was afraid that the 3 of them would oversleep as soon as they fell asleep, so he set the alarm clock several times, and even informed his secretary to call him when the time came. After all his preparations, they did not oversleep. Zhang Wanan didn't wait outside stupidly during the afternoon exam. Maybe it was because of Lu Zizhu's words. As soon as Lu Zizhu entered the exam room, Zhang Wanan took the initiative to take Lu Lin into a milk tea shop. Because there were a lot of people in the milk tea shop for the senior high school entrance examination today, I waited in line for a long time before finally getting to them, but there was milk tea but no seats. Zhang Wanan held the ice-cold milk tea and drank sip after sip, and said, how about, we go sit outside and wait? I don't really want to go out, the temperature inside is so comfortable. What should we do? Stand here. Just as he was talking, Zhang Wanan staggered because he couldn't stand still even if he was crowded with people. Have you seen the bookstore opposite? I've been observing it for a long time. There are many seats there and you can read and learn more. How about we go there? All right. She had no choice. She couldn't fall ill and worry Lu Zizhu, so she had no choice but to listen to her father's words. Just like that, the 2 of them went to the bookstore opposite. Zhang Wanan found a book of interest and sat down to read it carefully. Lu Lin also used his mobile phone to process a few documents. If you have a laptop, this is definitely a great place to work. Lu Lin secretly thought that he must take out his laptop tomorrow so that he could handle a little work, so that he would not have a headache if he accumulated too much. Zhang Wanan was too obsessed with reading romance novels, and Lu Lin was stuck in work and couldn't extricate himself. After the 2 of them watched for an unknown amount of time, the phone on Lu Lin's desk began to buzz and vibrate. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 197. Chapter 197, Do you still want me when you gain weight? Dad, your phone is vibrating. After vibrating for a while, Jongwon finally couldn't help but remind him. Ah. I have my phone in my hand. Lulin continued to look at the phone in his hand. I'm talking about the mobile phone on your table, Jongwon said, and pushed the mobile phone on the table in front of him. Lulin then remembered that his other usual mobile phone was on the table. He put down his work mobile phone with a smile and picked up another one. Son, what son? He looked at the several missed callers on his mobile phone with a confused look on his face. It's Xiao Jojo. Jongwon closed the romance novel and couldn't help but rolled her eyes. She even forgot that she had a son. She was so disappointed. Lulin nodded naively and put the phone back on the table. That's not right, Jongwon suddenly exclaimed and turned to look out the window. Dad, Xiao's Huzi has finished his exam, we forgot about him. Lulin couldn't help but said something rude, no wonder he made so many phone calls. Jongwon put the book back on the bookshelf, and then ran out quickly with Lulin, because he was almost regarded as a book thief. After contacting Lu Zizhu, the three of them still met under the tree. Lu Zizhu looked at the two people running over with helplessness and said, if my mother finds out about this, haha. Let's go, study, and gain knowledge, Jongwon said, bending over and panting. What kind of books can you read? Lu Zizhu snorted coldly and walked in front. Jongwon hurriedly followed up and grabbed Lu Zizhu. Xiao Jojo, don't be angry. We didn't forget the time on purpose. Yes, son, Lulin also said. Yes, Dad just forgot that he has you as his son, Jongwon said with a bad smile. A guy who has been cheating my father for 10,000 years. This is just a girl. If it were a boy, he would beat her to death. Lu Zizhu looked at Lulin and snorted coldly, I suspect you have a son outside. I am speechless. Originally, I wanted to go to dinner first, but seeing that it was still early, Lu Zizhu wanted to go back to the hotel first, so the three of them went back to the hotel. Let's go to Aunt Tang and my mother's restaurant to eat tonight, Lu Zizhu suggested in the elevator. Eat flowers. Or just small cakes. When Jongwon mentioned the small cakes, her eyes lit up. Lu Zizhu slapped her on the head and complained, I know that eating small cakes and eating too many desserts will make you gain weight. You've gained weight and you still want me? Jongwon raised her head and asked seriously. Yes, Lu Zizhu said firmly and seriously. As much fat as you want. Get out. The moment the elevator door opened, Lulin kicked Lu Zizhu and pushed Jongwon with one hand. Just like that, the two of them were mercilessly thrown on the 13th floor. By the time the two got on the elevator and arrived at the room, Lulin was already sitting on the sofa, talking on the phone with his wife, and started to accuse them of the day's crimes. Lu Zizhu and Jongwon looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. How old are they for complaining? They are both fathers of two children. Spicy chicken. Lulin, who was despised, thought for a while that it would be better to live in the company. No wonder he loves his job so much. Finding a reason to love work, Lulin took out his laptop and started working, thinking that he would just let the two people fend for themselves. At around 6 o'clock, Lulin drove the two of them to Tang Yu and Lin 11's dessert shop. The two of them prepared some side dishes and made some fresh desserts when they knew they were coming. Enan loves to eat. I don't have time to care about her now. Come to think of it, I'm really not a qualified mother. Tang Yu shook his head in self-reproach as he took the dessert outside. Why not? Don't think so, Lin 11 comforted her. Tang Yu smiled bitterly and continued to prepare desserts without saying anything. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 198. Chapter 198. You look so cool when you give in. When the three people arrived, the small round table was already full. Lulin was stunned when he saw such a table of dishes. Out of surprise, he whispered to the two children, "If there is anything cooked by your mother on this table, you will die here tonight." When Lin 11 came out, she happened to vaguely hear what he said behind her, and asked with a sullen face, "Who is going to die?" "No, no, no." Lulin waved his hands hurriedly and sat aside dejectedly. "Don't worry, put your heart in your stomach. I didn't cook this table of dishes. I just helped out. This is all Tang Yu's credit. Just eat as much as you want." Lin 11 put the soup on the table. "Explain." "That's good," Lulin said softly. "If you like it, eat it, but if you don't, go away," Lin 11 said. She hadn't investigated the matter of him secretly hiding his pocket money, but she actually disliked the food she cooked. So Lulin finished the meal in silence that night, not without saying a word, but the only words he said were "okay, okay," and "yeah, okay." He was afraid that if he said the wrong thing, Lin 11 would pursue the matter of private money from him, which would be troublesome if pursued. After a hearty meal, the three of them drove out of the dessert shop while it was still dark. Before leaving, Lulin said to Lin 11 very thoughtfully, "You guys should go back early. It won't be safe if you go back late." During the 2 days when Luzes, who was taking the high school entrance examination, Lin 11 stayed at Tang Yu's house to keep the two of them company. "Yes, I have to go back early. If I go back early, I can call you to talk about my private money." Lin Zisui smiled broadly, but gritted his teeth when he spoke. Lulin silently wiped the sweat from the bottom of his heart and got into the car. "Looks like I have to turn off my phone when I get back." He started the car and muttered softly, "If I had known better, I would not have betrayed myself completely for the sake of two white-eyed wolves." He, a dignified CEO of the Lu family, has such a low IQ. Perhaps your IQ will become lower only when you meet the three of them, he thinks. The three of them returned to the hotel. Zhang Wanan had nothing to do because she didn't go to school. She laughed while watching her favorite show. Luzes, who was beside her with an expressionless face. "How funny, why don't you laugh?" Zhang Wanan turned to look at Luzes, who was expressionless, and stuffed a potato chip into his mouth. After hearing what she said, Luzes, who chewed up the potato chips, swallowed them, and forced a smile. "Watching you laugh is funnier than watching TV." Zhang Wanan looked at him with a fake smile and patted his thigh and laughed. Luzes, who glanced at the hand that was patting her leg, silently grabbed it and pulled it in front of him and rubbed it for her. Zhang Wanan was confused by him, so he withdrew his hand and continued to pat her leg and laugh. He was speechless. She didn't even know he felt sorry for her. Let her just let it go. As a result, after slapping her thighs, Zhang Wanan stopped laughing and started waving her hands and yelling hiss. Luzes, who once again pulled her hand in front of him, rubbed it, and said, "You deserve it." Zhang Wanan looked at him with a smile and said, "Then if you can, let me hurt you. Stop rubbing it." "I have no ability," Luzes, who sighed. "You look so handsome when you give up," Zhang Wanan said and raised his chin with her hand. "Don't touch your nose or face." "Oh." So Zhang Wanan sat down obediently and watched the TV and continued to pat the other leg with the other arm. He, this means that the limbs are sound, Luzes, who thought as he glanced at her. After thinking about it, Luzes, who put a pillow on her lap and said, "Slap this, the force is mutual. If you slap your thighs with your hands and legs will hurt. I have to just rub them for you, so I don't have to do anything, nothing else," Luzes, who said with a hint of complaint at the end. Zhang Wanan nodded and started patting the pillow obediently. After patting for a while, she suddenly realized something was wrong. Her laughter stopped abruptly. Then she looked back at Luzes, who and asked, "Aren't you going to review? There are still exams tomorrow." "No, I don't like to improvise," Luzes, who said leisurely, twisting around the thread he didn't know where to get it from. She doesn't understand the world of top academics, so she quits. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 199. Chapter 199. It seems to have become a luxury. You, on the other hand, have been wasting your time just following me these past 2 days. What should you do with your homework? You are already in the 4th grade, why are you still absent from class when you are not in a hurry? Luzes, who almost pointed at her forehead. Didn't I think of you? You don't have to go to school after the exam, you can teach me. She approached Luzes who with a flattering smile. Luzes who was reluctant on the surface, but when he heard the words "and you," he was already happy. He muttered, I don't know what your teacher thought, but he gave you leave. I said that my brother was a top student and could teach me. Then he asked me who my brother was, and I proudly said it was Luzes who. Then the teacher approved it, and also asked you to visit your alma mater more often when you have time, Jongwon said with a smile. Flattery, please go back and see more. I guess I can only see you when I go back, Luzes who said with a cold snort. Don't you want to see me? Where is your good desk mate? Doesn't he help you with your homework? Luzes who didn't answer her question and asked about Zhang Baihui. He hadn't heard this name for a long time, maybe because he didn't meet him enough and Zhang Wanan wasn't around. The reason for the chirping in his ears. If you don't want to, I'll go find him. Anyway, he's very happy to do it, Zhang Wanan said nonchalantly. I'm happier than he is. Then I'll look for you, Zhang Wanan said and crawled into Luzes who's arms. Luzes who patted her head lovingly and said in a good mood, since I have nothing to do, I will watch a stupid drama with you. Is there really no need to review? Zhang Wanan confirmed to him again. I told you that I don't like to improvise. Zhang Wanan nodded and lay comfortably in his arms watching TV. It had been a long time since they had been like this. Thinking about it, it seemed like this kind of getting along had become a luxury. The two of them sat quietly on the sofa watching a stupid drama together. Lu Lin saw that scene when he came out, and then he went back and closed the door. Well, he is redundant. It rained a little when Luzes who took the exam the next day, and it was a bit humid. After Luzes who entered the examination room, Lu Lin returned to the car because he forgot to take his notebook. Zhang Wanan just stood there holding an umbrella and walking around in the water. Oh, Enan, your feet will get wet soon and they will be cold, Lu Lin said helplessly when he came back and saw her treading water. No, Zhang Wanan looked at her shoes and said innocently. Anyway, only the employees will listen to what he says. Other times, it's as simple as saying P. Go to the bookstore, Zhang Wanan asked. Go, I'll buy you a cup of hot milk tea first, so you won't be cold for a while and you'll be warm, Lu Lin said thoughtfully. Zhang Wanan nodded and followed him into the milk tea shop. There has been a big temperature difference in the past 2 days. It was a sunny day yesterday and I would sweat even if I sat there. But today it has become very cold, and my face feels damp and cold when I walk. Zhang Wanan came out with hot milk tea in her arms and walked away while drinking. Lu Lin couldn't stand it anymore and grabbed the little girl and lectured her, don't drink before crossing the road. Watch the car. Xiao Jojo and I never have to look at cars when we cross the road, Zhang Wanan said, biting her straw. Lu Lin, is this being abused? Why do I always feel that I will be abused invisibly in the past 2 days? Zhang Wanan drank a cup of milk tea quickly. Lu Lin glanced at it and pushed the coffee he just bought over and asked, is it cold? If it's cold, drink less. Zhang Wanan shook his head, thank you, Dad. You can drink it? Xiao Jojo said that I am too young to drink coffee, so I can only drink a little. Get out, go find your romance novel, Lu Lin pretended to be angry. Zhang Wanan left with a playful smile. But to be honest, after being abused a lot in the past 2 days, I found that the relationship between the two children was better than they imagined. This is exactly what they want to see. End of this chapter. The Lu family's wife is so sweet. Author, Yoon. Chapter 200. Chapter 200 is pretty good. They were still like yesterday, with Jongwon reading novels and Lu Lin working. The only thing that had changed was that this time they had not forgotten Lu's who. The two of them kept checking the time while they were reading and working, and Jongwon often looked out the window to observe the situation outside. There were 10 minutes before Lu's who finished the exam when Lu Lin and Jongwon raised their eyebrows and left. It was still raining lightly outside. Jongwon rubbed her arms through her clothes, feeling a little cold. Lu Lin glanced at Jongwon, took off his coat and said helplessly, "You don't obey even if I ask you to wear more clothes. Children nowadays." "Thank you, Dad," Jongwon said with a smile. The two of them were still standing under the tree. After Lu's who came out, he naturally held Jongwon's hand. Poor Lu Lin followed behind and it became unnecessary. "They say you forget your mother when you have a wife. I think you are very unusual. You actually forgot your father. It's a shame that I left a lot of work in the company to accompany you in the high school entrance examination," Lu Lin muttered from behind. "He is now very unhappy. You don't have to come, but you have to apply to my mother. If she agrees, you won't come." Lu's whose words made Lu Lin collapse even more. They had lunch at the hotel. There were not many people in the dessert shop on a rainy day, so the two women made some dishes and delivered them to the hotel. "Son, today is the last day, take the test well," Lin 11 encouraged. "Well, don't worry, Mom, but someone seems to be unable to continue the examination," Lu's who said absently, but his eyes drifted to Lu Lin. Lin 11 also glanced at Lu Lin and said, "Someone has been a little crazy recently, even a little arrogant. After you finish the exam, he will have to deal with it." "That's good," Lu's who nodded in agreement. It's good, it's good, it's good." Lu Lin smiled awkwardly and felt a little uncomfortable. It seemed that the matter of hiding private money was not over yet. "If I had known earlier, I would not have given those two white-eyed wolves delicious food. It would be too difficult for him to sell them after they had finished eating. Ever since he was discovered hiding his private money yesterday, whenever he has time or when he can't sleep, he thinks about how cheap he is, and the money he has worked so hard to save for so long is gone. The key is to accept the punishment. It seems that he is going to make a small bed in the study when he goes back. Asterisk. This afternoon was the last one. Lu Lin checked out of the hotel room at noon, and then took his two children on the way to the exam. "I'll treat you to something delicious after I finish the exam," Lu's who said. "I don't want you to treat me to a meal after the exam. I want you to treat me to a meal after your results. I can wait, because I know you will definitely do well in the exam. After the exam, you will treat me to a better meal." Jongwon smiled. "Smile slyly." Lu's who patted her head and asked, "Do you think it's not good for me to invite you?" No, I. Jongwon was busy explaining. Lu's who smiled and said, "It's okay. Then I'll take you to eat when I get the results. Then let's just say it, Lago." Childish. Even though he said this, Lu's who still took the initiative to reach out his hand, and the two of them hooked their little fingers, and finally ended with Jongwon's crisp fixed sound. Asterisk. Lu's who breathed a sigh of relief when he walked out of the examination room in the afternoon, thinking that it was finally over. But just after Lu's who finished the exam, Jongwon fell ill in the evening. "Anan, go home with your dad tonight. Your mom just called and said that they have to get up early tomorrow and they can't take care of you. It just so happens that your little Huzi is on vacation, so let him take care of you," Lu Lin said while driving. "Really?" Jongwon's eyes widened in excitement. "Are you happy?" Lu's who asked with a smile. "I don't know if she is happy or not, but he is happy anyway." Jongwon nodded vigorously. "How long will the two mothers be busy?" "How many days?" Uh, there's only one day tomorrow, Lu Lin said. Ah. Zhang Wanan was instantly discouraged when Lu Lin said this. She thought she would be busy for several days, so that she could be with Xiao Zhuzi for several days. End of this chapter.